Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe Muro. And now, here's Zoe.
Hi, folks. Welcome to the New Thought Media Network, and welcome to Choice, your creative superpower. My name is Zoe Muro, and I am delighted to be your host. If you're coming back, it's good to spend this time with you once again. And if this is your first time, welcome. Each Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 12 noon Mountain Time, we explore how you can use the amazing superpower of choice to co-create your life experience for the greatest good. I'm a religious science practitioner at the Oakland Center for Spiritual Living in Northern California and a transformational coach. I work with people who are looking to live their lives to the fullest. In today's episode, episode 24, in honor of the new year, it is indeed a new year, 2023. We'll be looking at choice and beginnings. I love this quote by Israel Moore Ayavor. This is in the Great Handbook of Quotes. No matter how short or long your journey to your accomplishment is, if you don't begin, you can't get there. Beginning is difficult, but unavoidable. Love that. Well, we all know what a beginning is. It's the start of something. The meaning of the word begin is, of course, to undertake, to start. But its origins also include the idea of to attempt, which is a good reminder that a beginning definitely does not come with a guarantee for completion. Some beginnings can exist or come into existence on their own, while others actually require an ending. Regardless of how a beginning comes into being, it always starts with a choice. Of course, that choice might not be yours. How choice fits into beginnings most certainly does depend on who the originator is, as we have seen again and again in our discussions of choice. Let's start with those beginnings that we create for ourselves, some consciously, some unconsciously. Then we can look at those we haven't created for ourselves, but we choose to align ourselves with. And lastly, those we don't necessarily want, nor would we consciously choose, but they become ours nevertheless. Okay, so we choose to begin things because we want to accomplish something, whether it's to build something, or experience something, connect with something, or connect with someone, or to develop something. There's always some benefit involved. Whether it's realistic or not, whether it's truly a benefit or not, whether it's for us or not. Now, this being January, well, at least it's January when I'm airing this episode for the first time, we often see that the start of a new year, and yes, that is a beginning. The start of a new year is a common practice. It's for people to create resolutions. And often, if not most often, this is around wellness or finances. Well, I'm not going to limit this discussion to resolutions, but it does make a very handy way to discuss beginnings. So, the dictionary defines resolution as a firm decision to do something. So it brings with it a certain amount of baggage. After all, we resolved to do something. How many New Year's resolutions actually last? or come to fruition? Well, according to most studies, somewhere between 9 and 12%, which makes it a failure rate of about 88 to 91%. Now, personally, I have a 100% success rate with my New Year's resolutions for the past 20 years, because 20 years ago, my resolution was to never make another resolution, other than not to make any more resolutions, other than, okay, well, you get the idea. So I haven't made any other resolutions in 20 years. Works for me. So the big question is, of course, why do so many of the resolutions that people make, these choices that they've made, why do they go down in flames? There are probably as many theories as there are people making resolutions. But I'm going to call out two in particular. One, they weren't based in reality. Two, they didn't differentiate between something that could actually be acted upon and what is actually a state of being. So, thinking about choice and success, that is to say, having a successful choice, the bigger issue isn't whether or not you choose to make a resolution, but rather that you choose well. Now, a resolution is just one aspect or one example of a beginning. As I've said, and in light of the new year, I did think it worthwhile and timely to discuss it, but the concepts and concerns are going to apply to other beginnings as well. So, think about a resolution that you've made and ask yourself, is it a resolution to start something that you're going to do, or is it that you're somehow going to be different? So is it about doing, or is it about being? Each of these has different choices associated with it. For most people, resolving to do something often means adding yet another responsibility or task into their life. I'm going to read more. I'm going to work out every day. I'm going to walk to work instead of driving. I'm going to eat a balanced diet. Nothing wrong with any of those. But all of them have the potential for being wildly unattainable. Let's just look at one aspect of these revolutions. If you're going to read more, work out, or walk rather than drive, where is the time to do so going to come from? Put another way, before you can begin doing something new, do you need to consider what you're going to give up or stop doing? If you're going to eat a balanced diet, what has prevented that from happening in the past? Because that means you're going to be doing something differently. What will you be adding in or taking out? Now, honestly, we could spend a lot of time discussing how to make these rock solid. And that is a big part of what I do as a transformational coach. But given the nature of this show, I need to focus on the interplay of choice and beginnings, not really about setting and achieving goals. So the thing that many people forget about beginnings is that they are often coupled with endings and often need to be. So if I choose to pursue eating a healthful diet, to go back to that one, that almost certainly means I will need to stop eating the way I had been eating, or stop eating certain types of foods, stop eating the amount of certain foods, whatever it might be. But you get the idea. Something has to change. Want to read more? Want to work out more? Maybe that entails choosing to limit your TV time or your social media time. Endings and beginnings. So we're not only choosing what we will do, we're also choosing what we will no longer do, or we are choosing what we will do differently. If you've ever been involved in an intimate relationship that was breaking up, but there were mixed signals coming from one person or the other, or both, you know how that complicated having a successful new intimate relationship. Jack Kornfield, in one of my favorite books, Buddha's Little Instruction Book, wrote that everything that has a beginning has an ending. Make your peace with that, and all will be well. That puts an end to mixed messages. Let's consider another way that beginnings such as these are dependent on other choices. And that would be how you'll implement the change. So the idea of eating a balanced, healthful diet is great, but what constitutes that diet? Now, you can choose to follow whatever the latest craze is, but odds are it will be a far cry from healthful and balanced. Sometimes we need additional information in order to make not just a choice, but to make an informed choice. We've spoken many times about how personal choices are. And even in this example, there's an important element of personalization that comes into play. How and what you eat might be wonderful for you and terrible, absolutely terrible for someone else, and vice versa, of course. This is one of the reasons why those fad diets and even non-fad legitimate diets fail. They simply aren't personally appropriate. So before one begins a diet, it would be crucial to understand your actual dietary needs, your restrictions, interaction with medications, your own physical well-being. All of these things can have a tremendous impact on how you choose to eat. Similarly, the month of January sees probably the greatest influx in gym memberships and in gym attendance than any other time of the year, even summertime. But by February, crickets. You can hear it. All you hear is the crickets. Lots and lots of room. I used to work in a gym, and it was crazy. January would be insane, and February, flat. Why? Because people don't choose what is appropriate for them, which means they've neglected to look at one or more of these variables. Now, remember, we're talking specifically about working out. So the type of exercise, the duration of the exercise, the frequency, your current level of physical fitness, realistic exercise goals. Just for a few things. All of those are choices. So it's easy to see where we can go wrong with these types of beginnings and how important choice is to being successful with what we've started. But many of the same principles apply to other beginnings as well. Okay. Any beginning needs to be carefully considered. And I'm not saying that it's going to be terrible repercussions if you don't, but let's face it, we want to be able to succeed. One of the things that I've seen so often, and when they talk about why people don't succeed with what they've begun, is because they say, well, it's a lack of discipline. I honestly do not believe that. I believe what we're referring to as discipline really is having the ability to sustain something, but having the ability to sustain something that is not right for you, that doesn't make sense. If you saw my episodes on well-being, you know that the last thing that you're going to be able to do to achieve well-being is to do something that is absolutely counter your spirit, your values, your needs. Plain and simple. Now, those of us who are on a defined spiritual path. And I say it that way because I believe personally that we are all on a spiritual path, whether we realize it or not. But those of us who are consciously working on our spirituality, well, we can have the same issues to a great extent when we talk about beginnings. And again, this is another one of those things that we see quite often around resolutions. Years ago, I chose to begin a meditation practice. And not merely to meditate on occasion, but a true daily practice. And I must have begun that practice about 10 times before I found something that was actually sustainable. I discovered that I needed to choose the most appropriate type of meditation, the best location in my home, the times of day that would be most effective, which typically means most likely to be uninterrupted, the best physical setup. So I like to sit on a cushion, sit on a thick pad. Do I use guided or unguided meditations? Do I use music? A whole series of specific choices which have allowed me to consistently meditate nearly every day for years and years. I missed a session here and there, either when I was too ill or they were unforeseeable and unworkable circumstances. One of the methods I recommend to clients to ensure that what they begin has the best chance to come to fruition or to be sustained is to understand how this new activity, behavior, or perspective fits into their overarching personal vision. In spiritual circles, we use visioning quite frequently. Matter of fact, it's often a first step to understanding where we are, where we want to be. But I do recommend it virtually to all of my clients, regardless of their spiritual perspective, because choosing to do the work to envision the desired end result, regardless of its being an action or a state of being, we get a sense of where we are, where we want to be, a sense of how it all fits together. And that allows us to understand priority. It allows us to understand the importance of what we're doing. It allows us to not only say what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, but why. That why can make a huge difference to whether or not what you have begun you're capable of sustaining. Now, obviously, not every beginning needs this. But those choices we make to bring about a greater sense of self can benefit enormously from the practice of visioning. Now, I probably should explain what I mean when I say a greater sense of self. I don't know how many movies I've seen that have a line like, you make me want to be a better man, or words to that effect. Well, folks, you don't need to be a better person. You need to be a better you. That is to say, more completely you. Ultimately, completely you. So much of what we think of as our failings or our defects are circumstances and conditions that have clouded our truth. And that's capital T truth. We are all creations of the one, of loving spirit. And we were created perfect, whole, and complete. In essence, we have forgotten who and who. And our striving for bettering ourselves really about clearing away the noise and the detritus of false beliefs to allow our true self to emerge. Some of us, unfortunately, never get to see or acknowledge that underlying truth. As a result, we live lives of limit and restriction. And I suppose what's truly sad is so many people never even realize how limited and restricted their lives have been. No matter what you think your greatest good might be, there's more. Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "We are always getting ready to live, but never living." We are always getting ready to live, but never living. That's not the way I want to be. That's not what I want for my clients. That's not what I want for any of you. I want to take a moment here to acknowledge a very important distinction between choosing to begin to do as opposed to beginning to be. Okay. So say you're going to read more books. It's doing something. It's pretty clear. You can count the books as you read them. If you say, on the other hand, you're going to be more responsive or more open or more loving or reasonable, take your pick. How exactly do you begin that? The reality is you would need to do something or stop doing something to affect that change. So if your beginning is about a state of mind, a state of being, however you want to express that, recognize that you have more choices to make. I can say I'm going to be nicer to my neighbor whose dog is always traipsing through my yard. Well, how will that happen? What would that look like? Does it mean you stop yelling at the owner? You'll accept that it's easy enough to clean up the occasional gift that was left behind? You'll invite your neighbor over to have coffee and chat about the situation? Hey, those are all actions. Even if you decide you're simply not going to let it bother you, that requires you to choose to see the situation differently. Unless you literally no longer notice at all, each and every time you do notice, you're making that decision to say, it's not a big deal. Or you turn the garden hose on the owner of the dog. Oh, that's a great idea. No, just kidding. Don't do that. And never, never, never blame the dog. Dog is never wrong. It's always the owner. I want to switch gears to different types of beginnings. The beginnings you did not choose, but you choose to align with. For example, I don't know, how about becoming tech savvy because of a pandemic, which has shut down so many of your social and work avenues? Who would even think of such a thing happening? Oh yeah, it did. And you know what? We saw that as a way to move forward. All right. We had a beginning. We had a tremendous resurgence in people actually embracing technology and learning. It's astounding to me, the people who in the past have said, oh, I'm too old. No. And they're Zooming like experts. How about this one? In 1998, I became a grandfather. Definitely didn't choose to become a grandfather, but I did. And boy, did I ever align with that. I love you, Elise. I love you. And I love being a grandpa. And then there are those beginnings that you never want to deal with, let alone align with. The loss of a loved one is a clear, although painful example. It's perfectly natural that we would think of that as being an ending. But in truth, it is also a beginning. It's probably easiest to see it as the beginning of grieving, and there's no denying that. Nor is there any benefit in denying that. But our lives have changed. It may even feel as if our world has changed. So it is a beginning of a new phase of life. It is the beginning of a new way to be in the world. And depending upon what your spiritual beliefs are, it's the beginning of the next step in your loved one's journey, which is what I most certainly do believe, that we are indeed eternal. We spoke about grief in episode 10. That was September of last year, in case you haven't seen that episode. But for this discussion, it's important to recognize that as familiar as we are with the now iconic stages of grief that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross posited, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, we're less familiar with a sixth step that she had considered. Now, she actually made her own transition before it became known or well known, but her colleague David Kessler, whom she worked for many, many years, he picked up the mantle and he brought us that sixth step, which is finding meaning. Now, I'd strongly recommend you read Kessler's book entitled Finding Meaning, but consider this. Meaning is what you make happen, and only you can find your own meaning. And once you do, you will have a beginning that enriches your life, even as it honors the loss and allows your love to uplift and support you. Those beginnings we did not choose and would likely never choose are made in the image of our attitude, our perception, our mindset. We can see it as something that is devastating. We can see it as something that is an expression of the deepness of our love. We have one choice in particular for any of those beginnings we did not choose, and it is always about our attitude, our perception, our mindset. So much so that actually I want to talk about mindset in its own setting. So next week, I'm going to talk about the concept of choice and mindset. It's really a very interesting consideration. For today, though, I want to close this exploration with these words from the Irish poet John Anster. He actually had translated Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's tragic masterpiece, Faust, right? So these are actually Faust's words, sort of translated. What you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. Only engage, and then the mind grows heated. Begin it, and the work will be completed. Well, that wraps it up for this episode, folks. I'd love to hear about what beginnings you have chosen. So please feel free to email me at zodemuro@gmail.com. Let me put this banner up here. There you go. So feel free to email me here. Let me know what's going on with you in terms of beginnings, or if there's anything that you would like to talk about regarding choice that you would like to see me cover. Feel free to send me an email around that. I have really enjoyed spending this time with you. We're coming into a whole new year. And someone said to me recently, they said, well, I wonder what kind of a year it's going to be. I said, it's going to be a magnificent year. It's going to be a spectacular year. They said, how'd you know that? I said, because I am responsible for co-creating that year. At least my experience of it. So if you can, folks, go to ntmedia.org. Look around. All right? Are you looking for prayer, for meditation, information, discussion, meditation? We've even got music. Yep. You can go to ntmedia.org/listen, and you'll find New Thought music there. We have over 40 hours of programming each week with more to come. Today, 12 noon Pacific time. That would be 1 p.m. Mountain time. Check out Reverend Gina Calvario Krupka's show. It's called The Joy in the Journey. She's magnificent. And I would also say that if you can, go to ntmedia.org/donate. Help us bring all the goodness to the largest possible audience we can as we work to make this a world that works for everyone. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Until we meet again, much love and many, many blessings. Namaste.
Choice, your creative superpower. We have the power to manifest as we dedicate attention to our thoughts, but often miss opportunity to achieve the greatest good. Your superpower is waiting to be unleashed to unlock a fuller, more rewarding world for all. Join us every Thursday at noon Mountain Time for Choice, your creative superpower with Zoe DeMuro.